Excellency John Dramani Mahama, incoming President of the Republic of Ghana, 2024. Ayezu, Ayeza, Ayezuza. Oh, Nana Mantuza Moke Ayezu. Okay. So, Nana Ayezu. I say Nana Ayezu. We thank you all, Mr. President. It's time for you to bring your due diligence to your beautiful audience who have been waiting endlessly just to catch a glimpse of you. They really appreciate you, they love you, and thank you for coming, giving us the time that Toronto is the hub of Canada. If you come to Canada and you don't touch Toronto, then you miss the Jack Toronto, which we used to say before. Hi man, that's it. So we're here to give you the audience and would love you to say a word or two to us. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I want each and every one of you to get seated so that we can hear what they have to say.
What's that?
Thank you very much. Acknowledging traditional leaders, our chiefs and queen leaders. And as was said, Lorena herself is among your ranks. She's the Prez Mahama of Prez traditional area. If you are dressed in the traditional regalia, that they can come and join you where you're seated. And unfortunately, I don't think she got Queen Motherly accoutrements. Let me acknowledge you and thank you very much for joining us. We know that you're not supposed to do politics at the Supreme Court has said that our Constitution says, but we are happy that you've taken time to come and lend your presence to this occasion, and so we are grateful. I have several friends and relatives here who have made my stay very hospitable, and there's some of them who are my children, others are my brothers and sisters. Brad Sack, I saw him in the corridor somewhere, and he's over there. Grace Abudu. Grace Abudu was my wife's classmates in school, and they used to call themselves Coppers are wild. You know, and then Logo Michael is somewhere, I'm sure he's busy. And then Abdul Kubi himself, you know. Dr. Selom should be somewhere here. He's doing wonders in Ghana. Yeah, look at him at the back. He flew in from the United States because of this event. You know, and so we're wondering welcome. And Mr. Johnson should be somewhere. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, hi, how are you? Good, thank you. Indeed, so many people that I cannot all acknowledge. But let me acknowledge my entourage. Dr. Callistus is my administrator in my office, and he is in charge for directing me, you know, what to do. Stan Dobe should be somewhere. He handles media and communications and logistics. And so Stan, shout out. Joyce Power, who's my niece, who was deputy minister, is somewhere. I think she's risen a bit. And I have Francis, my photographer, presidential photographer, who got married just recently.
Congratulations!
So he didn't finish his honeymoon when I took him and brought him here. So we'll go back and we'll complete the honeymoon. And then we have Malik, the videographer, who's here with us too. But aside from that, I also have, I consider them my children. My friend who is late, you know, Oski was a very close family friend. His two kids are here, Kwesi and Nanama. I'm Sure, they're in the back there. Okay, good. Shout out. And then my son, JC, is here. He's in university in Toronto. Yeah, so he's joined your ranks. How do you call people from Toronto? Torontians. Torontonians. So I give it to you, he's become a Torontonian. And then his friends, I mean, they were in school together and they are in the same university. Jordan, who's sitting right next to him. And then my celebrity son, Sharaf. You know, he's so well known. I went somewhere and of course some lady saw me and hey, Prez Mahama, it's good to see you. And then one of them asked me, he says, oh, so you're Sharaf's father? I said, no, Sharaf is my son. You know, and so that is life for you. And so thank you very much. And let me acknowledge Madam Odina. Our paths have intersected. We did not deliberately come here. She was coming to see her child and look after her child. And I was going to Halifax because I've been invited to give a speech on slavery and colonialism to a conference of universities studying slavery. Of course, for those of you who know, my first degree was in history, and so I take an interest in history. And so I delivered a paper at that conference, and it was tempting, to combine meeting the NDC chapter with this trip. So the main reason was to go for that conference. And I said, look, while I'm in Canada, let's see how our NDC fellows are doing here in Canada. And I must tell you, I am impressed. In Ghana, most people have the thinking that NDC is not very vibrant here in Canada. Go and tell them that, look, we have a very strong, vibrant, chapter here in Canada. And so let me congratulate you for the warm welcome you gave me from the airport. We came out, I thought we were just going to go into our car and then drive to the hotel. And then suddenly in the baggage hall, the door burst open and so many of you were at the airport and they didn't care, I mean, who were there, they were shouting in Suez, and all the travelers were looking at us and saying, but who are these? No, but they couldn't give a damn, they just went ahead and gave me such a hero's welcome. I'm so thankful to you. And so, let me just say a few words. Today is our fundraising, but having come and let's talk a bit about our nation and also our party, and then how we are preparing and gearing up for the 2024 election. We all know that in 1992, the 4th Republican Constitution was passed. And it was passed with a lot of excitement. Ghanaians were tired of military government, and so wanted to go back to democracy, wanted to go back to constitutional governance, wanted to go back to rule of law, wanted to go back to respect for human rights, wanted to go back to freedom of speech. And we came to the conclusion that democracy is the best form of government for us. Because under democracy, you can hold your government accountable. It's not the same with the military government. Military governments are not accountable. And they do what they want. You can't question. You must just obey. And it's not even obey before complain. Obey, no complain. And so we all look forward to the new democratic government with enthusiasm. Of course, we held a referendum, we adopted the constitution, and then we held elections. And President Jerry Rawlings of blessed memory won that election in 1992 and was sworn in as the president for the first time. I said in my final speech when I was president that ours is like a relay where one runner hands the baton to the other. it takes teamwork to win a relay race. But everybody has to exert individual effort within his band of the race. So Rollins ran his segment of the race, handed over to President Kufuor. President Kufuor ran his, handed over to President Tamils. President Tamils did his parts, and God called him, and I took over and continued to hand it over to Nana. I must say, unfortunately, the excitement that greeted the beginning of democracy in Ghana has eroded completely. Especially amongst our youth are frustrated and they have lost confidence in our democracy. And that's why one day I said, Ghana is not immune from coup d'etats. I don't say there should be a coup d'etat. Ghana is not immune from coup d'etats. I don't say there should be a coup d'etat. But I'm saying that the guarantee to avoid having a coup d'etat is that the political leaders must govern properly under a democracy. We must eschew the arrogance. If you are elected or you are appointed to a position, you are appointed as a servant of the people. And so you must live modestly. You don't suddenly, because you've been appointed into a position, think that you can lord it over the people. And so our youth are frustrated. Our youth have lost faith in democracy. And so I talked to some of them, and they say, I don't see the reason why I should vote. Because every 4 years I go and queue to vote, and I don't see any improvement in my life. I left school 4 years ago, I can't find a job. I'm still living in my father's house, being fed by my parents. And so it's creating frustration amongst the young people, especially now with the current economic crisis that we have. Unemployment is at the highest that we have in history. And what I say is, we can't continue business as usual. Many of our colleagues say, oh, MPP has shown us how to govern. And so when we also come, it's our turn to chop. It's not your turn to chop. We cannot fight for political power to repeat the same mistakes that MPP has made. We are fighting for political power because we want to correct the mistakes they have made. And so let us all get it in. And I know anytime I say this, they say, hey, don't go and bring that your father for all matter. You know, but we have I think the father for all this one is taking you know, but we have just one nation and we want to make it better for those of us who are back home and for those of you who are here, so that when you come back home eventually, you come and meet a country that is prospering, that is conducive for business, is conducive for retiring, is conducive for whatever you want to come and do. And that is why we need to work hard to make sure that, you know, we change the course and the trajectory that our country is on. We were demonized when we were in government. I mean, all kinds of things were said. We were described as incompetent. And they just kept repeating, incompetent Mahama administration, incompetent Mahama administration. You know, and I kept telling them, I said, look, you can't turn things around overnight. We're doing the right things, we're putting the pillars in place in order to create the foundation so that the building of state can be raised. Often when you sit outside and somebody is doing something, you think you can do it better than them. And so because they had been in opposition and were sitting outside, they thought that governance was an easy thing. I mean, can you imagine that Nana Akufo-Addo said that I will transform this nation in 18 months? Yes, he transformed the nation, but he transformed it negatively. He took us back. And so We were vilified, but they say vindication lies in the bosom of time. And so my response when I handed over in 2016 was that I leave it to posterity to judge, because there was nothing else I could do. You know, I'd lost the election, so here you are. Posterity would judge if I did my best or I didn't. And when you read the Old Testament, God's vengeance used to come after generations. I think God has gone digital. And so now He delivers the judgment very quickly, very quickly. And so when I told them, I said, you've not been in government before, you don't know what it is like to be president. You know, they did not understand. Today, I'm sure they understand that it was not an easy walk in the park. And so, we have to work hard. 2024 is a battle for the soul of our nation.
Yes.
2024 is a battle for the future of our nation. And so, it's one of the most critical elections we're ever going to have in the history of the Fourth Republic. Currently, our country is going through some of the harshest economic crisis we've ever had in history. We have gone bankrupt. We've declared default that we can't pay our debts, and so we're asking our creditors to forgive us some of our debt. The domestic debt exchange has been done, and people have had to take haircuts. When we said there was going to be haircuts, the president said there will be no haircuts. And today we all know that that was not true. There have been haircuts. Poor pensioners are having to struggle because they cannot lay hands on the investment that they did. You all here know that the safest investment you can make is in a government instrument. I mean, there's no way government will ever renege on an instrument that you have invested in. But unfortunately, in Ghana, we have learned the harsh way that it was all a mistake. And so people who invested in government instruments, you know, have either lost their money or they are going to be repaid probably at a time when they will not be alive, because they've stretched out the repayment after the haircut, reduced the coupon rate, and some of the payments will take place in 2030, 2035. Who knows whether he'll be alive at that time or not? And many of these people are poor pensioners who have retired and went and put their gratuity and their savings into these bonds. And then others are middle income families who have saved money just so that they can always have an insurance in case of any event. Unfortunately, that has been eroded. Today our country has the highest unemployment rate in history, estimated at 13%. But if you take youth unemployment, it's even higher. Youth unemployment is about 25%. And so almost a quarter of the young people, you know, between age 35 and 18, let's say the year of from being adults, are not in employment. And so many people are finishing school and living with their families. We have the highest corruption rate in history. Some of our poorest performances on the Transparency Index is under this administration. And the president himself has become a clearing agent. We call him clearing agent. Because if something happens, leave it to the investigating bodies to investigate. You have no business interfering in an investigation that is taking place or passing a judgment. Currently, there's a case in court with a minister who had money stolen from the person's house. And then you write, accepting the person's resignation, and say, I'm sure that you will be vindicated eventually. It's not for you to conclude where the investigation will end, because president, you are prejudicing even that investigation. And that's not the only one. People are mining in forest reserves. We have 37 forest reserves. Today, you go and see the state of our forest reserves. There are people doing illegal mining in the forest. And when people are arrested because they are party people, you come and say, oh, currently there's no mining going on in the forest reserves. And yet, media every day are revealing that, yes, those forest reserves are being degraded. And so it's not the president's duty to exonerate people. Today we have the highest debt in history. When we handed over power in 2016, Ghana's debt to GDP ratio was 57%. Today, or even when we declared debt default, our debt to GDP ratio had gone up, according to the World Bank, to 103%. We took total public debt from independence through Rawlingstein till I left office at 120 billion cedis. Today, we are almost close to 600 billion cedis. And the question you ask is, what did we do with all this money? Within a 4-year period, our finance minister went on the Eurobond to borrow up to $11.5 billion, not cedis, dollars, in a 4-year period.
Yes.
And we kept raising the red flag. From 2018-2019, the rate at which we were borrowing said, look, you're going to end us into a debt crisis. And they said we should shut up. Ghana is credit worthy, and that's why people are prepared to give their money to Ghana.
And before back crash was
Eventually, the crash happened. And all of us are bearing the effects. But we must also look into ourselves and look at how truthful we have been to ourselves and eschew the hypocrisy that happens in Ghana. If you are an advocate for good governance, you must be an advocate for good governance at all times. And under any administration, your voice must be heard. You don't make a lot of noise because you don't like a particular government. And then as soon as the government comes and it's misgoverning, it's running us into crisis, suddenly the moral voices go quiet. And so they all, by their hypocrisy, have contributed to where we are today. And they must hold their heads down in shame. But I know that after 7th January 2025, when NDC comes, they will find their voices again. Today we have the highest inflation rates, 40%. It even went higher, about 50%, and it's coming down slowly because we've gone into an IMF program. Ghanaians are tired, Ghanaians are hungry, Ghanaians are angry, and Ghanaians want a change to their circumstances. And that is why 2024 is very important. We must all put our shoulders to the wheel in order that we can make Ghana great again, and that we can put our country back on its feet. Ghana has been the pride of Africa from our first president, Kwame Nkrumah, and that's why we're called the Black Star. And at all times, we have worked to make sure that we show the way. And so we led that continent to independence, the first country. And so in some things, we've led the way. In good things, we've led the way. In bad things, we've led the way. Because we led the continent into independence, and then we led them into coup d'etats with our 66 coup. And then everybody else started overthrowing their civilian government. But then we led them back into democracy in 1992. When Ghana adopted a constitution and went back into democracy, everybody started to move from unconstitutional governance to constitutional governance. And we led and demonstrated that we were the model of democracy on the African continent, and we're still respected for that. And so we are confident that a change will happen in 2024. And like I said, when that change happens, it's not going to be business as usual. The expectations of Ghanaians is going to be very high. Ghanaians are not going to tolerate some of the things that they have had to go through under this current government. Ghanaians are patient because they know there's an election coming next year, and they will have the opportunity to make a change. And so when they make that change, they expect that whichever government comes in, and I'm certain that's going to be NDC, they will hold that government to a higher standard. They will hold that government to a higher standard. And so let us all get our loins about the things we'll do. We will create opportunities for all our people, irrespective of your political affiliation or your ethnic affiliation. That means wherever you come from, or your religious affiliation. Ghana belongs to all of us, and all of us deserve to benefit from the fruits that our nation is able to harvest. And so we will create opportunities for all without looking at people's political color. We will eschew waste. Every year you hear about the Auditor's General's report, and billions of cedis are not accounted for properly. And so we must put in a system that makes sure that this money that is wasted, at one point it was 17 billion cedis, far more than the 3 billion that we're looking for from the IMF and the World Bank. And so if we can eschew waste, it will help. We also would reform our governance and depoliticize our institutions. One of the major problems with the current dispensation is that our institutions are politicized. Everywhere there's an opportunity to make an appointment, this president sends very partisan people to occupy those positions. And the examples are there to see. The Electoral Commission, I mean, the appointments he's made there are purely NPP people who have a track record of and are known to have been NPP in everything they did. Some of his appointments to the judiciary are NPP, people who are well-known NPP people. And we need to depoliticize our institutions. We must ensure justice for all. And one of the major victims of state injustice is this gentleman standing here. And the injustice that has been done him is an injustice to all of you who are outside in the diaspora and working, because it has been any of you in this position. The office of the Attorney General has been weaponized against him. The man comes back home to come and help. And what is his friend? Because the elections turned out 137. And so you want to forcefully take out one of the MPs so that you will have an advantage. And so they suddenly narrow in on him. He filled the nomination forms. He had revoked his Canadian citizenship. He had sent a letter. He had sent the necessary documents. It had been acknowledged. His revocation of citizenship had been acknowledged. In some countries, they don't give a certificate showing that you renounce your citizenship. Once you send it and they acknowledge it, that's it. So why would you say that at the time he filled the form, he had not yet got a certificate from the Canadian government renouncing his citizenship? He didn't need it. And so a petition was filed before the election. And the Electoral Commission must set up a tribunal to look into the matter. So the Electoral Commission called the petitioner and called him and said, "You are accused of being a Canadian citizen. What do you have to say?" He put all the documents there, his renunciation, the acknowledgement, everything. And the EC looked at it and said, "Oh no, then there's no case. You are cleared to stand." So what has the man done wrong? And he stood and won. As soon as he won, and we have finished the parliamentary elections, you realize we are 137. He said, no, then we have to go and raise this Jackie case again. He's the first MP I know a petition has been filed against who has had an injunction asking him not to carry himself or perform his duties as an MP. Everybody else who has had a case against him in Parliament has continued to work till the case has been determined, except for this man. For almost a year, no pay, nothing, no allowance, nothing. Don't carry yourself as an MP. And then by election comes, and they say, God never sleeps. And he will always show up for you if the truth is on your side. And the people returned him with an even greater majority than before. And so they say, okay, you won the by-election, but we'll prosecute you criminally for actually voiced. And it's just a weaponization of the Attorney General's office against them. And the Attorney General's office is a state office. And that's why the Attorney General is called the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. He's supposed to ensure justice. Unfortunately, that's not the case. This man was sent a message that if he didn't want the criminal trial to go forward, he shouldn't participate in the by-election. It shows clearly what the motive was. And he said, no, I was elected to represent my people, and I'm going to stand in this by-election and I will win. You can do whatever you want. You can bloody hell do whatever you want. And so he's still, harassed. He has to go to court every day to answer for, trumped up charges. We'll stabilize the economy, and most of all, we'll rejuvenate the banking sector. There's one thing that this government did that has eroded indigenous investments in our banking sector. They took a decision to close down some banks. I'm sure you heard about it. And the banks that were closed down were the banks that are owned by indigenous Ghanaians. Of course, those banks operate in the risky end of the market because they were responsible for the bulk of small and medium enterprise lending, because they knew how to lend in that market and they knew how to go back and reclaim their money. So definitely, if there is debt default, they will have a higher debt default ratio than the bigger banks that lend to Unilever and lend to the big corporations, lend to government and others. And so the point is, if they were facing liquidity crisis or if they had problems, the thing to do was not to knee-jerk shut them down, because it is estimated that they asked them to increase their capital reserve ratio by 400 million cedis each. And so, if, let's assume there were 10 of them, you're talking about 4 billion. So it means that if the government had given them 4 billion cedis and taking equity, this is what I would have done. I would have taken equity in those banks and advanced the 4 billion cedis to them as liquidity support, and put in the ethics and the principles of good banking. And as they pay the 4 billion cedis, you reverse their equity and hand them back to them. But then, what they did was announce the shutdown, guarantee depositors' accounts, and depositors' accounts came up to about 22 billion, between 22 and 25 billion. So, you solve a 4 billion problem with a 22 billion debt. That is exactly what happened. 4 billion problem, you resolve it with a 22 billion debt. And that is part of what has landed us where it landed us. Because with one decision, we added 22 billion onto our public debt. Because you have to pay all depositors the full amount of money they have in the bank. And so we'll also ensure responsible debt management. We must create a situation that another finance minister won't come and just go borrowing and borrowing because his company is the broker for Ghanaian loans. Clear conflict of interest. Every loan that you go and take, Data Bank earns a commission in it. And so you can understand his appetite for incurring debt. And so we must not just leave it to discretion, we must put it in legislation so that a finance minister cannot borrow above, every year we must calculate what our debt to GDP ratio is. And if we say, ideally we should not go above 65% or 70% of debt to GDP, it must be put in the legislation. We have the Public Financial Management Act. We can amend that act, or the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We can amend it and say, just as we say that a finance minister cannot overshoot a certain deficit, we must also put in there that he cannot overshoot a certain debt to GDP ratio. And so if he goes over it, he must bear the penalty for it. Otherwise, tomorrow we'll go through all this thing, we'll clean up the debt, we'll make the economy stable again, and some finance minister will come again and come and land us in the same in the same trap. We will promote indigenous businesses, and we will work to reduce the heavy tax burden on Ghanaian business. Ghanaian business is about the most heavily taxed in the whole of Africa. And not only Ghanaian business, Ghanaian consumers. Go to the supermarket and shop and take your receipt. Look at what is written there and just look at the tax section. And the tax section takes about nearly 40% of the cost of the items. In taxes alone, COVID levy, e-levy, what levy, so many levies, AU levy, ECOWAS levy, levy, and so we ease the tax burden. I don't say that it can be done immediately with the first swoop, because we've gone into an IMF program, and that accounts for all the revenues that must be, but we have to work to make sure that we diversify the revenue source of government. We really have to put the cocoa industry back to work. The cocoa industry, Cocoa Board is broke. They've run down the cocoa industry. This year they can't do a syndication of even 1 billion. 900 billion they're trying to do, and people are reluctant to put their money in. At the time I left in 2016, the cocoa syndication that we did was 1.8 billion. And it was oversubscribed, the number of banks that wanted to give us money for the cocoa industry, because it was working. We're giving farmers fertilizers and production was increasing. Even after we paid down the cocoa syndication, we always had extra cocoa to put on the spot market and get a higher price for it. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and we're in trouble now. We have to reduce the size of government. And I've said that we can govern that country with 60 ministers, not 125 ministers. And we must review Article 71. Article 71 creates two categories of Ghanaians. It creates what they call those covered by the Constitution, and then it creates the others. Those covered by the Constitution under Article 71, that is the members of the judiciary, the parliament, the executives, NCC, Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, and those other categories of workers. Their salary is determined by a committee that sits and determines what their emoluments are. And then the emoluments of the rest of the public is determined by the Fair Wages Commission. So it creates two categories of Ghanaians working for the public sector. And so while these ones enjoy more allowances and more pay, these other ones get less. And so NDC, our position is that we'll set up an independent emoluments commission to handle the salaries of everybody from the president right down to the sanitation worker. So that as we grow the country and we grow the economy, all of us will progress together. All of us will prosper together. Because if you come to serve especially in political office, you must make sacrifices. And that is why I said we will scrap ex gratia allowances. Because we don't pay ex gratia to ordinary workers. Why should the political class alone be the ones taking ex gratia? We will pro-looted government lands. Government lands have been looted. People with political connections have bought all the government state lands and they buy them for a pittance. Go and buy a land for 500,000 Cedis and they turn around and sell that same plot of land for $1 million. That is what is happening. And so you should go to cantonments, Laboni, airport, and all those places and see what's happening there. People have bought all those lands and suddenly high-rise apartments and things. In this crisis, when Ghanaians are all suffering, you go and see the construction that is taking place in some place. They work day and night raising high-rise apartments and things. And you wonder, what business are these people doing? That when everybody else is selling property and we say, all of us are doing some people they are not doing it for them they are drinking champagne and they are not waiting for you know, and these are the lands of the indigenous people of Accra, the Ghans. Those lands were taken for purposes of government, to build airports, to build accommodation for public servants, and other things. And state government, the law says that the government does not have need for it. The first person you should give it back to is to the original owner. But yet, without reference to the traditional owners, they just go ahead and sell it to themselves cheap. And some of them resell it at a higher rate to other people. Or they use it to build, you know, their own mansions or their own properties on it. So we'll set up a commission to investigate all those who have looted these. Because we must hold people accountable. And I think that this is something. We're becoming Trumpian. I don't know that you do our best, the rest will be left to the justice system, the judiciary to look at. We must mitigate the effects of galamsey, because galamsey is destroying our country. Our forefathers handed over that country to us, handed over the forests, the rivers, and everything to us. If they had done what we are doing today, can you imagine what would have inherited from them? And yet today we're destroying the waters. If you go and see the color of rivers, you'll be sad. If you were young when you left Ghana and you saw the Prez River, you saw the Prez River and you saw all those rivers, today come back and look at those rivers. There are no living things in the rivers anymore. The fish are all dead, everything is dead in the rivers. And we cannot allow that to continue. We must make sure that mining takes place in a responsible way. Government is not able to act because those who are doing the illegal mining are the government officials and the party executives. They are the ones doing the illegal mining. And that's why they cannot do anything about it. And so we must work to make sure that mining is done. Nobody says there should be no mining because gold accounts for a good income, foreign exchange earner for Ghana. And so nobody says we should not mine, but we should do it responsibly without destroying our environment. And so, ladies and gentlemen, work to save the future of our country. Expectations are high, and like I said, it's not going to be business as usual. We in the party are working hard to make sure that we cover all bases. And so we went to Congress, we elected a new executive, we've done our primaries, we've elected our parliamentary candidates, we have gone through the limited registration exercise, we're going into the process of selecting our party agents, we're going to train them, we have to get logistics, we have to get merchandise, t-shirts, posters, we have to do adverts, we have to communicate, we need party vehicles, motorcycles, the list is endless. We need fuel, we have to put together a resource transmission system, we have to put in security, election security to make sure that everything goes well. All this costs money. And that's why I'm pleased that in your own way you've organized this event. It's not about how much you raise, it is the thought and the love that you put into it. And so whatever you raise is your widow's mite. And if all of us give our widow's mite, I'm sure that the world would have enough money to be able to fund this. We claim in the last election we got 5-point-something million votes. Now if we got 5-point-something million votes, if everybody gave even $10, you can imagine how much money that comes through. It will go a long way to fund the party. And so we're going to put in place payment platforms. I know that for you guys here, to make it easier for you, that we have a platform so that if even you decided that, look, I'll give $10 every month, to help the party, I think that you'll be able to do it. I will appreciate it. The record will be there. We'll send you letters of appreciation to thank you for your donation. And even when I'm gone, continue to do these fundraisers. Don't wait for me to come before you hold the fundraiser. You can continue to hold fundraisers in your various branches in Quebec, in Ottawa, in Alberta, and all the other places. And whatever little you're able to collect, it shouldn't always be in cash. It can be in kind. If you come together and decide that, look, we're going to do 2,000 t-shirts, print 2,000 t-shirts and send them back home. Or we're going to collect bicycles and send them back home. Or we're going to contribute to buy motorcycles and send them back home to the party. Or we're going to get computers or something. Whatever you can do, to assist. We're going to put the party, what do you call it? Like the posters, the drawings. Yeah, we're going to put it in digital form so that you can take it and print your own t-shirts. You'll also find it on the party's website. And so if you want to print t-shirts, you want to emboss anything, mugs, you want to do any merchandising, you can take it off free of charge and then use it to do whatever you want to do. And then you can ship it to us, either to your constituency or you can send it to us at the national level, and we will express our appreciation for it. And so I want to thank all of you for your time, because the time you spent here is still more precious than how much you're going to give. And for some of you who've driven 4 hours, from different places to get here, I mean, just the drive and the amount of time you've spent here, I wish to express my sincerest appreciation to you and to pray that God will continue to protect and preserve you and take you back home safely and prosper you so that you can continue to show your love for the NDC party. I thank you and God bless us all.